meeting to order. I'll stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll have a roll call, please.
Okay, let me make sure I got some volume. Okay. Chairman Obranovich,
Here.
Vice Chair London,
Here.
Commissioner Kelly,
Hello there.
here, Commissioner Youngblood,
Here.
and Commissioner Hogan is not online yet.
Oh. Mike tends to have technical difficulties. So, okay. So the first item, now, usually we go over the Zoom meeting procedure, so I'll do that quickly. Everybody's already gotten the link signed on, and hopefully, the first thing we want to clear away, no echo tonight, right? Everything's good out there. I think that problem's been identified and fixed, so hopefully we won't re-experience that. For public comment, when we get to those sections, use the raise your hand feature. And I believe Mary Beth is coordinating the Zoom meeting tonight. So she will acknowledge you at that point. And we will still adhere to the 3-minute time limit warnings. And so then now, since this is a continuation from the previous meeting from the 27th from last week. So we're not going to go ahead and repeat the entire meeting. We're going to try to, in a sense, pick up where we left off. So we're going to skip some of the items, some of the routine business sections, such as the adoption of the agenda, public comment on the agenda, the consent agenda, and then we'll skip into the right straight into the public hearing. And we will also probably skip staff report, other than have the last time the staff report was full reading of the entire report. We'll just kind of have a brief summary of what our goal is tonight. I will go back and I will redo the public comment for items that are not on the agenda. I really don't want anybody to feel that they were shortchanged. So we'll do that, and that shouldn't take too long. So if you want to go ahead and start with that, Mary Beth, I'll go ahead and open up public comment for items not on tonight's agenda.
Yes, sir. If I could take a moment and, as you did, apologize to our audience for our technical difficulties last time. And I would like to open the meeting with Carol providing roll call. And Mike Hogan is on his way in.
Okay, we'll get Mike in here because we did roll call.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
we
but
did roll
now
call.
tonight
want
we
me
have
to do
Linda
it again?
here. Oh,
We did
you
it with-
already did it?
We already did that, yes.
Yeah, we
Okay.
did do it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we did.
So-
We're just kind of holding on for Mike to show up here and get moving on our public comment for items not on the agenda.
Okay, I think we can proceed with our public comment for matters not on the agenda. David Ring, you may unmute.
Can you hear me?
We don't hear you, David. Are there any other public comments we can go to? Maybe we'll come back to David.
No, sir.
Okay.
Bonnie?
Do we get to also make a comment on items that are not on the agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make a couple of announcements about the activities this week. So tomorrow, the Economic Development Committee is meeting at 6 o'clock. And then on Wednesday, we've got 3 p.m. the Circulation Committee, 7 o'clock the Historic and Cultural Committee. And then Thursday, we've got 3 o'clock the Land Use Committee, and then 7 o'clock Air, Greenhouse Gases, and Climate. And I just want to thank everybody, all of the community residents and all of the staff who are working so hard to run these committees. They've been very productive. Thanks.
Thank you, Bonnie. David Ring, I see
Okay,
you've
so-
returned. David is back, and all you have to do is
Okay.
unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
All
Dave, go
right.
ahead.
Good. It's good to see everybody. I know you can't see me, but it is good seeing you guys. My comment is tangentially related to the housing element, and so I just wanted to, I wasn't sure where I should bring it in, but anyway, it's also in regards to the properties at the old villages, the new Hidden Grove project. With the relatively recent rejection of the Hidden Grove project, I think the town has a really short window to close a loophole that was created when the town voters passed the referendum to stop the villages project. I think the town council should return the site designation of those properties back to general commercial site designation that existed in November of 2015. It would give the town at least some leverage over what gets developed at that property, with the possibility of some affordable housing or special needs housing there. As you all know, if Loomis is unable to require developers to include affordable housing, then we will be forced to continuously rezone properties to meet the arena demands placed upon us by both the state and by SACOG. I would actually like to hear from the town attorney about whether changing the site designation now would actually be applicable to those properties. Particularly, I would like to know if the town's rejection of the pre-application resets the time on changing those site designations, or if the ordinances and site designations are still fixed, even though the application was rejected. I do plan on bringing this up at the next town council meeting, but I thought if it was something that the planning commission considered to be important, you could actually include it in your approval and you could include in your approval a recommendation to revert the site designation of those villages or those properties in both the current and the future general plans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we get to the end of the attorney in the meeting when we get back to comment section toward the end of the meeting. If the lawyer wants to comment on that, give him a little time to think about it, and we'll do it maybe at that point. So, okay, so unless there's other public comment, we'll close public comment. Okay, so next we'll go ahead and open up a public hearing, which is the draft 2021-2029 housing element. And I'll just reread the recommendation. So it's to receive presentation from staff, discuss and receive input regarding the draft 2021-2029 housing element, provide direction to staff regarding issues or changes to the draft housing element, and adopt resolution number 21-01 to forward the draft housing element to the town council for approval to submit to the California Housing and Community Development Department, HCD, for their 60-day review. Okay, so now last week we went and Jennifer had her presentation, and the slide presentation on the Zoom meeting was without echo, was technically not flawed. So we will accept that presentation as said last week. We're not going to repeat it tonight. That was the intention. So with that, we'll go ahead into, I think we were starting to go into a discussion or questions from the Planning Commission from Jennifer. So now, before all that, last week I gave a little kind of a little statement about the housing element and tried to bring it in perspective and define it and what its scope and intention was. And that was in that the reason for doing that is after Jennifer's presentation and a lot of understanding and reading and going through this process myself, I think I became aware of some confusion on the part of a lot of people about what the element can and can't do. And as a committee member, as were several other people in this room who participated, as we started to get involved in the original committee meetings, we had a huge document and a daunting task in front of us. And we felt that we did have a lot of expectation that was presented to us, but we were uncertain of exactly what we couldn't do. So we read the document and was trying to figure out what parts of the documents we can change. And a lot of the things that kind of popped up and bubbled up into people's minds were, okay, how can we make this document actually workable? And then we started to think about things we should do and think changes we can make. Well, I'm going to go back to, I think, the intention of the housing element is that it is a state guideline. It's kind of a checkbox for different communities that kind of go through to see that they're providing the document for their town that kind of paves the way that houses can actually be brought into the community and built. Well, that becomes complicated in that what does the element provide and all the different detailed steps. So people started thinking about, okay, how do we make this a working document till it really has teeth? And a lot of the wording appeared to be, and it is, somewhat superficial in the sense it doesn't get into a lot of detail. A lot of those details are things that people were trying to fill in, such as a lot of different ordinances that would give the document a lot more teeth, such as density bonuses for, or ordinances for density bonuses, inclusionary housing, et cetera. We give fee waivers and incentives to builders and everything to make the project happen. And I think we started to maybe get off into the weeds a little bit. So I want to kind of just put that into perspective and revisit the presentation briefly, in that what the housing element does is takes a lot of the generalized information and tweaks it for the town of Loomis, and that it tells us exactly what our numbers are, which is 352 housing units. It tells us too that we need to identify lands that can be zoned for housing and other aspects. But so those things were done and identified in the housing element. So I think with that kind of a brief summary of maybe what the document can't do, and Jennifer, if you want to step in and clarify any of that at this point or add to that, I will just go ahead and leave it at that and then move it forward to questions from the Planning Commission. I believe that's where we left off last week. All right, thank you. So, okay, questions from the Planning Commission. I know we had questions last time. Mike,
Yeah,
if you want to
thank
go
you,
ahead,
Greg.
and you had a lot of good points. I know that we've had more time to think about it since the last meeting. And so if you want to go ahead and bring those forward, I think that's really important. And I know Bonnie had a number of issues too that she raised that we would like to revisit. So go ahead, Mike.
Well, thank you, Greg. I'd like to let everybody know that since our last meeting, I met with town staff and some of our consultants, and Greg was there also. And many of the questions I had last week were answered. Those questions included primarily were concerning conflicts between the housing element and the zoning ordinance. But what our plan is that after the housing element is sent to the state, well, sent to the council and approved, then sent to the state for review, it is through that process a draft. And that comes back to us with comments from the reviewers and can at that point still be modified. Now, also, the housing element is simply determines that we have to provide a certain quantity of housing for us, economic groups in our community. All we can do is zone land appropriately, and it's up to the property owners and the developers working with the town to actually build these units. So I think that's an important distinction. It doesn't determine what gets built. It simply says it's allowed to be built. Those were among the questions I had last week.
See, Mike, another important point, I don't think you raised it yet, is about the inconsistencies or the apparent inconsistencies in the way some of the wording was, and it might conflict with the development standards. And we're talking about, if you're going to have 20 units per acre, but you have to have certain setbacks, and maybe you have height restrictions, et cetera, it became a conflict and that maybe it wasn't doable. And Mike, I know, is interested in seeing that those conflicts can be resolved and clarified so that we don't run into that down the road. You want to go ahead with that, Mike?
Thank you, Greg. I did skip over that. We have these setbacks that are required on the properties, which effectively shrink the size of the property. And in some cases can actually preclude obtaining the densities that are designated. Also, we have height restrictions, which basically limit anything to 2 stories, making it also difficult to increase densities in areas where it's designated. So those can create conflicts between what the housing element says and what the zoning ordinance actually allows. So with the final approval of the housing element, the zoning ordinance needs to be brought in compliance with the housing element. Now, a couple things that I see are potential conflicts are the setbacks I mentioned, the building height. We're restricting buildings to 30 some odd feet high, which means basically 2 stories is the limit, and it limits the ability to put peaks on the roof, which I like to see peaks on the roofs. I think it blends it in with the community. So using, I believe Greg mentioned before, density bonuses in certain areas, for instance, close to Raley's or close to downtown and facilities, it makes sense that we concentrate some population there to support the surrounding businesses. It's easy for them to get services. They can walk there. So we need to provide a vehicle where in certain instances, the density could actually be increased. And that would be density bonuses, which perhaps someone from the staff could explain a little better than I can. Anders basically introduced this idea to me today.
You know, we talked about a number of things, but one is when the zoning code is updated, at that point in time is we have to make sure that the code is consistent with the general plan and what was adopted in the general plan. I believe the housing element does provide recommendations for incentives. So as we look at the zoning code, we can look at that and incorporate incentives into the zoning code. So I think those are the opportunities. One of the things we could look at is if you're looking at something other than, as Mike had said to me, flat apartment complexes or flat top apartment boxes, that we could take a look at the zoning code and allowing for peaked roofs specifically. So those are all things that would be looked at, not in the housing element, which is the overriding policy document, but it would be looked at when we're actually updating the zoning code itself.
Okay. And that's another thing I wanted to kind of emphasize is through this process tonight is this element is a draft element. So we don't have to necessarily correct everything tonight in great detail, but what we'll do is forward to the council our recommendations about some of the inconsistencies and concerns that we have. And since the draft, that's an opportunity for them to fix it at that point. And then it does go back, it goes to the state, and the state is going to make comments and it comes back to us. And then that's opportunities more for more revision. So I would, people who are listening to Zoom tonight and they want to have some more input or say or forward their ideas, they will have more opportunity to do that at the council level. So just to remind you that you can use the general, it's a general plan update at loomis.ca.gov. And that's an email, and any comments you have, you send it to that and it will be distributed to the appropriate committee, whether it be for housing or land use or whatever. And also on that 120-day extension, I want to remind everybody that that period starts May 15th. And that time, as I understand, it's been explained to me, has already pretty much been consumed. We don't have the opportunity to have more planning commission meetings and back and forth and discussion, et cetera. During that time, it has to go to the council for review and I believe two meetings. Then it goes to CUD, and then it comes back from them, and we have to do more work, and then for final approval. So we're on a tight schedule here, and everybody's running hard and fast. So, okay, Mike, did you have anything else? Any other questions from Jennifer or Andres or staff?
No, I think
Okay.
not. Thank you for your time.
You bet.
I
Bonnie,
did want
know you probably- I'd like
to,
to-
Commissioner,
ahead.
I did want to make one point of clarification. Program 6 is a program to update the zoning code to increase the height to allow for 3 stories. And
Okay.
I think the program will eventually kind of modify into update development standards to make sure that everything is copacetic with allowing for 20 plus units an acre. So that will be actually, I can already tell you that will be a request of HCD that those things be modified. So we are proactively putting in that program.
Perfect. Thank you. So Bonnie, I know you had a number of important points we were in the midst of discussing last week, and I think we need to hear those again, if
Hi
that's
there.
okay with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also want to thank Anders and Mary Beth and Christy for also spending a great deal of time trying to explain and walk me through some of these things, because it's complicated. You know, it's housing in general is complicated. So a couple of points. I think one point of confusion for me was there was a typo where it was town tourist commercial, and I believe that was a typo. That actually there is no change in designation for the tourist destination. It's simply the town center, or the CC zoning. My question is, with that, it's the 2 vacant parcels that were identified to help us meet the RHNA numbers should the high density overlay over in the former village site not be used for affordable housing. If those go from, if we get a project that's approved and that's approved for market rate, then we have to identify some more sites. And so my understanding, and please let me know if this is correct or not, but my understanding is that's why those 2 vacant parcels that are over by Rayleigh's that are town center or CC zoned, those 2 sites were identified. My question is then, why do we need to then upzone the entire town center commercial area that goes all the way along Horseshoe Bar and Taylor Road? All of that is currently zoned for mixed use with allowable residential at 15 dwelling units per acre. And so instead of just kind of, carte blanche changing the zoning for all of that, could we possibly just do a high density overlay on those 2 vacant parcels, since those were the 2 sites that we're trying to capture backup of affordable housing? So that was number 1. And do you want maybe to respond and then we can go through that?
Do you want me to jump in real quick? So we're not using so if you lose the villages site, you have to find more sites in addition to the commercial sites that we are using right now. You do not have enough sites so we're at break even 0 right now, relying on the commercial with the increase, including those 2 vacant parcels in the inventory. So if you do lose the villages site, you will have to find additional sites in the town. So.
And so I'm sorry. So is that the height? Is that those 2 vacant parcels are the alternative sites?
No, you need to show all of. So right now the land inventory shows the villages plus shows 50% of each of those commercials, or allowing up to 50% at 20 units an acre on each of those commercial sites. You need all of that, plus you need ADUs. So we are using every single tool in the book that we can use to show on paper that you have enough inventory. There is a concern when we get to HCD that they will have an issue with us counting the Villages site, which is a large number. We're counting it for over 100 units. If there is an issue with that, we will now at this point the town will have 3 years to find another site or multiple sites that will accommodate 100+ units in addition to that.
Right, but I'm trying to find the page because it seemed like there was also an awful lot of surplus. Because we do have a lot of land. I mean, that's, one of the advantages, but also disadvantages. And I'm going to have to try to find where that
There is a very small surplus but knowing that we're relying so heavily on the Villages, your surplus is gone and then you're in a shortfall situation, which then you have 180 days, not 3 years to rezone.
So then I guess that would bring me to the next one, which is the ADUs. So program 12, essentially the goal is really not to do anything differently than what we've done historically. And yet we do know that the state, that's one of the few areas where they've actually given us some kind of tools that we could take advantage of. I know that the cities of Auburn and Rockland, we actually permitted more ADUs than they did. And yet they are setting goals of like Auburn is 120, so 15 a year. And then Rockland's was more 35 per year. And I forget exactly what that is for the total 8-year cycle. And yet we're setting a goal of 3 per year. And so, my request is, again, knowing that there's more tools that the county is going to be rolling out this campaign where they have free plans that people can download. There's permitting fees that have, been waived. So, we actually have the kind of property where it would make sense, as opposed to Rockland, where, they have a little bit more of the suburban style commercial or residential development that would make that difficult. We have 958 acres of, large acreage lots. And speaking to community residents, it's definitely an area of interest. I was contacted twice last week by residents who either they are getting older and they don't want to downsize and move. They want to stay on their property, but they see this as a way of either, downsizing into a smaller dwelling and having the primary be, for family or for a rental, for generating some supplemental income so that they have more money coming into their own pocket. So it just seems like, a program that I think we should make a higher priority to meet, again, I think it's the easiest, the cheapest way we're going to be able to actually produce more diverse housing stock into the Loomis. So that was that one. With regards to the inclusionary zoning, I'd listened to the committee meet, and that seemed to be the top priority from the committee members. One thing, going through the program, it looks like it wouldn't, the goal is to try to have that in place in 2 years. And I had also sent an article. I asked Mary Beth to send it out to all of the planning commissioners. But if you've noticed, since January, the Sacramento Bee has been running articles fairly regularly about the migration to the suburbs, Placer County and El Dorado in particular, and all the growth that's taken place. And, I just don't know that we have a whole lot of time, to be sitting around and, not getting these things in place because we're already back on our heels. Besides the inclusionary zoning, you also have in lieu fees, and that's something that we don't have at all. We have no money at all set aside for those various programs that, essentially the state, and developers will want us to pony up if we would like to have affordable housing produced here. And so the further we go not getting these things in, the further behind we get. So there was that one. And then last, just going through all of the programs, it's an awful lot of work for one person to do. And so, it's impossible, honestly. And so, again, I guess my question is, knowing the kind of growth that's taking place and the pressures from the state with regards to housing, I just, on a personal note, wonder how realistic it is to have one person manage, all of our housing and planning. So that's my comments.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's a lot of thought in there, a lot of work, got a great ideas. So I think a lot of that is work that will be done a little bit down the road, but it certainly now's the time to set the stage for that. Okay. All right, any other comments from planning commissioners? Jennifer, okay. See, Jennifer, I was asked earlier, I guess, if you would respond to some of the questions.
Greg, Stephanie?
Stephanie.
Stephanie, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, Stephanie, go ahead.
So I kind of have a list myself. Again, just because I'm new and because a lot of stuff has been triggered reading this. If you want me to table it until you're done talking, Greg, I can do that. I just have
you
a couple
got, that's
questions
right.
here
Well,
myself.
I had intended for my question to Jennifer to be kind of at the end of the planning commission discussion. So we're fine.
Okay. And please, I apologize again for this lengthy list. It's just mainly because I'm new and because I've had a lot of people ask me questions about this myself. And I, after reading all this, did have some questions. So do you want me to ask each question and Jennifer answers it, or just go through all the questions and you guys can do kind of a brief summary of it? How would that?
Well, you said you got a lot of questions, so I don't know. I don't know. It's up to Jennifer. I think I'll let her
Whatever you
decide.
want, if you want me to
If you want
answer
to
or
go ahead
whatever.
and ask the questions, because sometimes the answer might be one answer for several questions.
Yeah. So I'll just go through and ask all these, and then anybody can jump in. So the first one, when I was reading this, I believe it was page 48. And again, this is a question because I am new, but is it 61 acres or 7 acres? I know that originally we were zoning 7 acres for the villages, but then I was reading through that and I interpreted that there was 61 acres that either been still set aside that hadn't been pushed off from that previous program. I just kind of want to know, because that's as big as Disneyland. I don't know if you got everybody here has been to Disneyland. But
7 acres was for the 7 acres, I think, was for the high density. The entire project, I think, was 66.
And is that including Jennifer's comment that we have to find new new areas in addition to what we already
You would
had?
need to find an additional about 7 acres if you lose the villages site. We're relying on 7 acres on the villages site for high density. So if you lose that, you have to find an additional site to accommodate that.
Okay, see, that's the first question. We got that. So cool. So moving right along. And then as far as, and I kind of brought this up on Friday, but I just kind of want to bring this up as somebody who's lived here my whole life. And I went to school here. I went to parent school. I went to Del Oro, played sports, know a lot of people who still live here. In a couple of the committees, it has been brought up about diversity, that we don't have enough. Now, there's 2 things I want to point out. First of all, we have diversity. A lot of people live here. It's just that we all live in that kind of Loomis mindset that we are all citizens of Loomis. We, not to get too political or anything like that, but like the movie Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, the comment that he made to his father is kind of how Loomis is. We are just people. We look at ourselves as citizens. We are here together as one unit. We're a big family. We want to keep things small. I can point out on several occurrences while I was in high school and elementary school where there was a lot of diversity. It's just that people move here and for whatever reason they decide they don't want to be here anymore, or they move on to something else. One thing I do want to bring up is that one of our star football players when I was in high school was an African-American gentleman. He actually got a full ride scholarship to UNR, but during that time period, it was very diverse. You can actually go through, there's a lot of Native Americans, there's a lot of Hispanics, there's a lot of Asians already here. We have people who are disabled that are here. We actually do have homeless people that are here. We have low income. There's a mixture in Loomis. So in terms of what I would like to say is I think we need to work with what we have and keep Loomis small and kind of find housing for people who are already here. One thing that was mentioned that was brought up to me is that there are people who are married who get divorces or things happen in their family and those people, I think we need to focus on more so and keep the people we have here, not bring people in who are going to take housing from people that are in need of staying in Loomis for whatever reason. So that's one thing it's a comment and kind of a question I just wanted to point out, that I don't think that we are so, like, everybody thinks it's mostly Caucasian people here. There's, you know, that's kind of what I wanted to bring up. That was one comment I wanted to bring up, that we do have diversity here. It's just that that's not what we're all about, is diversity. We're about being a unit in a small town and a small family. Another thing I have, how are we going, again, so because, and the reason why I bring this up is with sports at Delaware, we always raise money and things like that. How are we going to account for this huge project? Is there enough money that Loomis already has? Are we going to have to do things like that we may not want to do, like raising taxes? How are we going to generate that revenue? I know the state looks at that and says, well, we have to do it. Well, how is it going to be done? Another question I have is, and I think Bonnie kind of touched on this, it is a lot of money. Do we have that money as a city already, or a township? And then are we going to fix the already congested areas, like on Webb Street and Taylor, because of Delaware and things like that? Because when these people move in, I don't know about you, but I've lived here my whole life, and it's a battle. Sometimes I have to go down Sierra College just to leave my house. You know, people are driving 50 miles an hour down Webb Street already and honking at you when you're going the speed limit. How are we going to account for that? Because it's going to be crowded. Are we going to have them walking, or these are things I wanted to bring up. And then I have two more. How are we going to keep Loomis small is a major thing. There's a lot of people who are very upset about this because they lived here their whole lives like me. They don't want it to turn into LA. We also don't want it to turn into Del Paso Heights and places like that where we lose our Loomis appeal. We want it to stay small, stay a big family, and we want it just to stay kind of the way it is. So these are all the questions I do have. They're concerns about, I would say 90% of the people in Loomis are really worried about this. So how are we going to do all this? So those are my questions. Sorry that I asked, but they are valid questions. So.
Okay, well, I appreciate those questions and thoughts. I think that's important. I could touch on some of the issues. You know, diversity is really important to Loomis, and I think that's one of our goals. And also historically, this has been a Japanese, Asian American community, and there's a lot of certainly historical diversity, from that perspective, and not now going into the future into where we are today. That scope needs to be broadened. And you mentioned something about keeping people in Loomis who are forced into situations where it's difficult for them to stay. I think that would be beyond our scope of control, because those are personal choices, and we can't control people's personal finances. And if you have a lot of money, you just buy another house next door, and but that's not the case. And I think that's I'm sympathetic to your concerns, but that might be a tough one to tackle. Unless somebody else wants to comment on that after, then that would be fine. Money, revenues into the town. We'd have to have that sidebar discussion maybe with Sean on some of those. He's really good on the numbers for the town. And there is kind of a problem in what we are doing with housing, and that when you have retail versus housing, retail brings in money, housing doesn't, not so much. So you want to preference your growth maybe toward retail if you want to make more money, like i.e. Costco. But the state is leaning on us to update our housing. And so there's kind of a conflict there, and we have to try to make it happen both ways. The rural aspect of our community, believe me, nobody's more sensitive to those issues in the Planning Commission, because we've been listening to that, for years. In the village, that's what it was all about, I think, was some of the maintaining rural aspects. And we're trying to strike a balance to where I think the town is meeting its responsible obligations in the community to provide housing for all eligible people. Not everybody wants to be here is going to be here, but to certainly provide better opportunities through the housing element. And in doing that, we still want to attempt to keep it small and rural. And there's a conflict there. So I think we have a lot of large lots. I think Bonnie identified how many large rural lots we have. If you have 4 acre lots and they're divided into 2 acre lots, or 2 acre lots are made into one, so you've got 2 homes on 2 acres instead of 1 on 2 acres, that's increasing your density, but that's still somewhat rural. Maybe it becomes rural to semi-rural. So anyway, those are some of the comments I would have to your questions, and you addressed the questions, I think, kind of openly to everybody. So if you want specific answers from somebody else, then go ahead, or if somebody else wants to comment, please do. Is that okay,
Well,
Stephanie?
I mean, at least you gave me input. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that these are situations that a lot of people have been asking me about, that I think that they at least need to be brought up. Obviously, most of the stuff I think that you did clarify, and it was good. I just felt that we need to have a little bit of dissent and think a little bit about this, because there are some concerns there. But you did
Sure.
answer my questions, Greg. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Go ahead. Well, Linda hasn't spoken yet. Go ahead, Linda.
Stephanie, thanks for speaking up, because that's what gets us to where we need to be. And I appreciate your comments. And I think that what we have to do as a planning commission is to find that balance of, meeting the needs of the state requirements, but yet keeping our town the way we envision it to be. And that's the hard part. And we're not going to please 100% of the people, but we have to, we have to do certain things. And so finding the right properties so it makes sense for our town to keep the feel that we have, to, have gathering places, have places where people can walk either to work or to transportation or things like that is so important. And that's what we're all trying to do. And this particular housing element that we wanted to pass on to the town council it's really kind of general right now, but it's not final. And I think we need to keep that in mind. Don't panic. No one panic yet, but it's moving, and we have to move it forward. And your questions were very valid, and I really appreciate what you said. I just want to let you know that.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks for your support.
Okay. All right. Oh, yes, Bonnie, go ahead.
Thank you. And yes, I mean, I do hear a lot of what Stephanie mentioned from other residents. It's been interesting doing the, attending the other land use committees and getting a bigger picture. And I mean, I've learned so much in just the past, month or so that we've been doing this, and definitely look, at things a little bit differently. But, one thing that's become apparent is that, we have that downtown core on Taylor, that essentially runs from Lorenzo's down to Del Oro. And that's where the majority of our population lives. And we keep, trying to increase density the way that you typically would, kind of like I think it's called the new urban design, where you have the highest density in the center core, and you just kind of filter out as you get to the periphery. And I do have friends who have downsized and they've moved into like downtown Sacramento. And there's a trade-off, they no longer want to maintain the yard, but they also now, when they're living in either East Sac or downtown, they have some advantages. They have the advantage of going to Crocker Art and being able to walk around. There's a lot of really interesting public spaces. There's a lot of community benefits that they gain that way. And as I've been driving around, our downtown core, and one thing that we learned in Park and Rec is that, we really don't have adequate parkland or public spaces. And, one in particular that struck out at me was, we have the Anchor Park and Skate Park, and that they're saying that that's 3 acres, when in essence, it's actually 1 acre and 2 acres of parking lot. And, when you think about, some of the developments that have gone in, what has the community received as a benefit? And so, in my mind, that is something that, I think I'm going to try to be more conscientious about, is what is the community benefit? Especially when we're asking those folks who live in the already the highest dense areas, that we're asking them to increase the density. What are we doing to improve their quality of life? I just think it's a question that's foremost in my mind. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So Jennifer, I'm going to go back to what we were discussing earlier, and I don't know if you prepared for this. It was suggested to me that I ask you that you would answer some of the questions or comments from the last meeting. Do you have that? Or no? Maybe not.
Oh, from the last meeting, we couldn't hear, so.
Okay, Mary Beth,
We couldn't-
I think, are you
Yeah,
there?
there was an issue.
I got to scroll over. Mary Beth, I think you had asked that question of me earlier. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so, do you know what we're referring to, or maybe we're not really prepared for that?
And this is regarding the correction in program 11,
Okay, specifically?
specifically just the town, the tourist destination versus the tourist commercial district.
Yes,
Okay.
That higher
All right,
density.
thank you.
yes, there was that. Bonnie did mention that there, Commissioner Bonnie London mentioned that there was a typo, and yes, we apologize on that. It was town center, not tourist commercial. So that was the revision. So it's the central commercial and the town center, not tourist. And right now it allows 15 units, and so again, the density that HCD would be comfortable with showing is 20, because that is what Loomis's default density is. So showing that you allow for 20 in your central commercial provides us with, and again, we're only using half of those 2 sites. There's 4 sites that are currently zoned central commercial, and 2 of them are too small to develop. We're using the 2 sites as we showed in the map, and that would provide us, and we're only using half of those to show that development could occur at 20 units, and that we would net out about 27 units. So we're showing capacity for 27 units on those sites. That's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think looks like we're going to conclude the discussion for planning commissioners at this point. I don't know if staff has any comments as a follow-up to anything we've said. Otherwise, go ahead, Andres, please.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, you need to be aware that once HCD completes their review, there's very little chance for us to change anything because they're monitoring that document extremely carefully. This is their checklist. They are holding our feet to the fire. If we say we're going to do something within 2 years and we don't do it in 2 years, the next time a grant comes around, they're going to say, you're non-compliant with your housing element. We don't know if we're going to give you the grant or not. You have to understand, this is HCD has their blinders on. And as we said before, there's a lot of opportunities for the town of Loomis to address issues within the land use element, in the other elements, in the code of ordinances. So it's really important to, again, the general plan is general. This is a policy document. This is not where the rubber hits the road. The rubber hits the road when you get into the implementation measures that are discussed in the housing element, but they're implemented after the housing element is adopted. So a lot of the discussion is about on the ground, building the housing, getting it done right away. The housing element sets a framework for the town of Loomis to do that. It sets a framework to say there is enough land to do that and meet the state's requirements. So, I think we have to focus on, so many of these comments are really implementation that happens after the housing element is adopted. The other thing for Stephanie, the town does prioritize how they spend their money. So take a look at the town's budget, take a look at the town's capital improvement program. That shows you where they plan on repaving roads and the priority. There's a whole system designed to look at the roads. Sean can discuss this, but there's a numbering system that, you know, it tells you the worst roads in the town, and generally the town then tries to pave those first before they pave others. So definitely, if you're interested, you know, come in on the Economic and Fiscal Committee, and you'll hear discussions on that. Definitely with Sean, definitely with the council that prioritizes the spending of money. So again, the housing element is a policy document. It is setting the framework for us to do things. Everything comes within the implementation that pretty much has been discussed tonight.
Yeah.
And we have to focus on that implementation.
And that was part of my intention of my little talk in the beginning, is that we not wander into the weeds.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Andres. So if anything else?
I was just going to, regarding Stephanie's monetary question, at the June 1st Economic Development and Finance Committee meeting, Roger Carroll, Town Finance Director, will be there to do the same type of presentation he did at Council last month, which was very, very interesting. So we're going to pull him into the committee and have him talk directly to the committee members who maybe did not see that presentation.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
And for when Bonnie was talking, she talked about an article she relayed that I haven't found a place to put it yet, but I posted it in our chat here. So for those of you viewing publicly, feel free to pick up that link from the chat. It's an article that was in the Washington Post about Placer County.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I think next I'd like to move it off into public comment. So I imagine we might have a few. And also maybe David had a question earlier, Andres. So I don't know if you thought about his question and had an answer. If not, then I just recommend you just kind of have a sidebar discussion via email or something with David.
And Andres is going to take a first crack at it, and then I'll add a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first crack is, what the town has done is we received a pre-application for Hidden Grove. We went through the pre-application and found that they did not comply with all the requirements of SB 330 in the pre-application process. So we have returned the application to them saying that it is not complete, and they're in the process now of completing that application. And I'm going to let Andreas talk about SB 330, but basically it says the land uses in effect as of January 1st, 2018 are the land uses that shall be complied with. So I think the response to David is there is not an opportunity to change land uses back to what they were previously. The land uses that we have, I believe, are the ones that we have to stay with.
Yes, and so the follow-on piece is David also mentioned affordable housing, and imposing affordable housing requirements is a process that would need to go through the city council. There would be planning commission review. Before all of that, there would also be CEQA review. So that's a multi-month process. And at this point, while theoretically there is no affordable housing requirement in place, or not theoretically, there is no affordable housing requirement in place, there likely also isn't any time to adopt one to put it into place before we likely receive a completed preliminary application for that project. So
Okay.
I think with that, we've covered what David had brought up earlier.
All right, thank you. So any other public comment?
I have 3 people waiting in the wing, if you're ready.
Okay, all right.
Linda Williams, you may unmute.
Okay.
Uh-oh, we're not hearing you, Linda. There's some technical issues. Maybe you can type your question into chat to Mary Beth, and then we'll come back to you, and then we'll read your question. because there's some audio issue. Must be on your end because this thing has been going flawless this evening. So, so please just type it out into chat. Does that sound okay? And then Mary Beth will catch it, and we'll catch before we close public comment. We will go ahead and answer that. Next comment, Mary Beth.
Jesse Lunsford.
Good evening. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm not trying to be argumentative, but the housing element is a very important issue. We get one meeting in the public with the planning commission. We get one meeting with the town council, and we're supposed to cover 120 pages of detailed information. I feel like the public is being shortchanged and getting its opinion forward on some of the issues. Now, some of my issues, again, don't mean to offend anybody, but the game's going to be over in 2 years with developers. We have 4 large pieces of land. We've got 3 developers already biting the bit on those 3 units. Inclusionary housing is framed for 3 years. Bonnie mentioned 2. I've got March of 24 when they're expecting it to take place. Also, ADU units. ADU units and inclusionary housing are already working elements of Placer County. Why can't we adopt their plan, piggyback on it, and immediately move forward with ADUs and inclusionary housing? Everybody is banking on upgrading to the units. And there's a study that was done by the UCLA Anderson School of Management. It was done for Citrus Heights in conclusion, or in working with SACOG. They concluded that upgrading from 20 to 30 units does not affect rents, and it does not affect the sales price. So we're banking too much on a one-game plan of getting our affordable housing moving forward. Jennifer mentioned that when the 75 units are denied, we have 3 years. I was told it was 180 days once the permits are pulled. My understanding is we have 180 days and we have to keep the same, we can't downzone. We have to stay with 25 units per acre. We have to move all 7 acres within 180 days to additional land. My next issue is we talk about parking standards. And I'm sorry. What's happening was we want to change multifamily parking standards to remove additional parking spaces requirement for each bedroom over 3. California SB 1069 now allows converting garages. So we lose the parking spaces in our garages and we're forcing people out into the street. I've lived in duplexes. I've lived in, quadplexes. I've lived in apartments. It's not noise the number one issue. The number one issue is parking space. I've seen fights over parking spaces and what people think they're allowed to use. Also, there's even little details. Why are we redefining family? We're redefining family to include 1 member now. My understanding is PlaceWorks worked with Auburn. Auburn stayed with US Census terms of a family is 2 or more. So little details like this, the public's never going to get a chance to go through in such a short period of time. And I do appreciate your time. I just feel like the public is paying the price because we've delayed too long on the housing element, and now we're under the guns of the state. Thank you very much for all your time.
Okay, thanks, Jesse.
I have Linda Williams available.
Okay,
She
Linda?
fixed her.
Okay, let's try this again. How's
Yay.
this?
Loud and
Yay.
clear.
All right. Hey, I do agree with the gentleman who was just speaking, and Commissioner London mentioned it earlier. I don't know why we're not going forward with ADUs much sooner. To adopt only 3 as our goal, I think would be an understatement. You know, I currently live in something that's been zoned years ago called rural estates, and it really limits us who are on these parcels as to what we can do. But under the ADU process, it would allow several of us to move forward now rather than waiting for something to be adopted. And I think that we have waited far too long. We're going to be in a hurry to try and accomplish a goal to keep our town compliant. But I really don't think that you have enough information to make a sound decision about the ADUs that could be had within our community on these pieces of land that are a little bigger than single home parcels. I think that's
Can I
it.
just mention that ADUs are currently allowed by the state of California, both the accessory dwelling unit and a junior dwelling unit. They're allowed by right. So that can be done in the town of Loomis today.
Okay.
And I think the number of 3 is just kind of a minimal goal. I think doesn't mean that's all you can have. You can have more than that.
It's taking an average of 2018 and 2019, averaging them, multiplying by 5, which is the safe harbor for the state. You can do 5 times your average. So the state has set up how we can calculate ADUs. So we're, again, the average between 2018 and 2019, and then multiply by 5. And that's how we got to the number. In 2020, you did 1 ADU. So that doesn't help the case when we have to show your track record of ADUs. And previous to that, there wasn't enough either to do that. So again, there's no, you can take credit for every ADU you do. So I think that's really important to say. Mary Beth has to report every year to HCD. You can take every ADU that you do, you'll report, oh, we met our RHNA by doing another ADU. Also, the ADU that you did in 2020 is it's for a moderate income household. So again, that doesn't help the case for lower income. However, we're using the state safe harbor. I just wanted to mention on Bonnie's questions about Rockland's number was rejected by the state. Rockland is going to be on a long process to get there. The state wants 1 and they're here, and it is not anywhere close. So that's not happening, and you're lucky that you're not dealing with that right now because it's not pretty. And then in Auburn, they actually have just approved a 65 unit project that will include also that many ADUs. So there is actually a project to count towards those ones in Auburn. Rockland, I don't know where it will end up because there isn't. And also ADUs is not based on capacity. It's based on the state dictates that. It's based on how many have been approved. So that's all the information that we can use. We don't want to set you up to, we can definitely increase your number to say that you're going to do more, but we can't count it. We can only count the number that's safe harbored by the state towards your RHNA. Because if you don't do those, if we tried, which we can't, because like I'm telling you right now, we've tried higher number of ADUs in Rockland and other jurisdictions that have been dictated, and the state has completely shot it down. So we're using the number that we can use based on the safe harbor. If I do work in jurisdictions where they have to go a lot higher because they don't have land inventory, and they have to put in a program that says if we don't do the many ADUs as we said we would do every single year, they're saying we're going to do 20 a year. If you don't, and they consider that a shortfall, and the HCD will slap you with the letter that says you will need to do a rezone within a certain amount of time.
You know, I'm wondering if people are thinking that number 3 is a limit to how many we can have.
No, we've actually, we're using 13, but no, you can do as many ADUs as you want.
Yeah.
Your goal can be whatever you want it to be. We can count.
Yeah, 3 is a minimum goal we need to meet. You can do way more than that.
How many ADUs can you have on a piece of property?
I think you can have 2.
Right. You can have a junior ADU, a junior unit, which is attached to your house. So it has to physically be attached. And then a accessory dwelling unit is one that can actually be standalone on your property. So 2 per property.
The state does not see ADU. We can, while we're counting 13, over the next 8 years to meet your arena. That's how many we can count based on their parameters. Again, you can do more, but we have to show that you have vacant land available, the majority of the site, to show that there's development certainty that can happen. You don't know if ADUs are going to happen, and based on 2020 there was one, so that's what the state's going to come back at us and say. So that's why we have to show certainty. Right now the majority is, again, the Villages site to meet the arena.
Okay.
Can I just respond? We do have the mixed Taylor use project, and there will be 9 ADUs that go on that site. Auburn's goals were that their housing element was received and accepted. And again, they were projecting 15 a year. I agree. We don't have enough of a case to make for 15, but I do think we have a fairly strong case to make for 10. And Greg, the reason that matters is because, again, those RHNA numbers, especially for the very low and low. And so if we were to project that we would do 10 a year, a goal of 10 a year, that would be 80. And I know that it was calculated based on, some economic factors. But if I just just off the top of my head, look at the 24 and that 13 of them were for the very low and low, if we did 8, then that would be 40 units that we would be able to count. And again, it's a goal that we set. We don't actually produce. But honestly, in my mind, talking with community residents, it really is the most pragmatic approach for our community because it really puts the control into the residents. We don't have large greenfield where we're going to be able to get affordable development put in by the developers very easily. And again, usually you need to be able to contribute money from the cities or the local jurisdictions. Since we've not collected any in lieu fees at all ever, we have nothing to contribute. So that's just my 2 cents.
Well, that might be a good point for, with this, rather than trying to change that tonight, which I don't think we can, for something that's food for thought that we would forward as a recommendation maybe to council to consider. Okay. All right, any other public comment?
Yes, sir. Sonia Coupler, you may unmute.
Yeah.
And you have just a reminder to all public, 3-minute time limit. Carol Parker has the clock going in the corner, and you get an extra 8 seconds.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say that I concur with Mr. Lunsford on his previous comment. And I realize that the state is leaning on the town of Loomis, and there's this deadline to meet with the housing element. But I just want to go back to a comment that Mr. Anders Haig made at the beginning of this general plan update adventure. And he basically said that the general plan update is the constitution of the town. And I just want to remind everybody about that because when you're making your deliberations and thinking about the future of the town, that this is something that we're going to be living with for the next 20 years. So I just want to point that out because I think it's something very important to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Okay.
Next up, Kim Fetke. Please proceed.
Hi, Kim Fetke, 3070 Humphrey Road. Thank you, first of all, for delaying the meeting tonight so that we could all actually hear you. I appreciate that delay. That's a much better meeting tonight. And I'm really happy to hear so many comments about ADUs because that kind of is one of the overriding things that I have to comment to. And thank you, Jennifer, for that explanation about the safe harbor requirements. I also like Bonnie's suggestion for increasing those numbers based on the project that's going in on Taylor next to Lorenzo's, if that's something we're able to do. Because, you know, as some of us know, our hands are tied in a lot of ways when it comes to this housing element. I mean, the whole thing is mandated on the town by the state. You know, that there's certain things we have to do. But within those requirements, the town can and should, and in my opinion, has an obligation to go beyond those, you know, textbook requirements and encourage the kind of development that the town wants to see. And so one way to do that is to be projecting more numbers for ADUs than 3. You know, that gives a message to people of what the town wants to see. And in the element as drafted now, you know, the introduction says that this is about ADUs, mixed use, infill, and alternative incentives. And I like that. That's fits Loomis. But you know, the reality is that a lot of the housing discussions in Loomis do involve just density. And that's how we've always dealt with this housing element, is just designating places as high density. And then they don't get developed as high density. We never meet our requirements. And if they ever did get developed as high density, they wouldn't be developed as affordable housing. And we just have to create more high density down the line. But ADUs are a way that we could, you know, find a balance. You know, it says that and tiny homes on wheels is you know, included in that. It can provide small rental housing without changing the character and the feeling of density around town. So I would encourage trying to encourage more ADUs, more mixed use, more infill parcels around town with duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, rather than concentrated areas of high density, which the town has made abundantly clear that they do not want. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. David Ring, you may unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just wanted to real quick say thank you for addressing my earlier comment. I'm not sure that you understood exactly what I was saying, and this really isn't the appropriate forum for this type of conversation. So I was wondering, is the town attorney's email address available on the town's website so I can contact him, or can somebody please contact me with that information, please? Thanks.
Mary Beth, can you send David my email address, please?
Yeah, I will, Andreas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, David, it's probably most appropriate to send the email to the GP update, and then Andreas will respond through that so that we have a public record. One thing you should be aware, everything is public that we're doing. And by going through the GP update email, we make sure that that information is available. And just so you know, this is based on the recent court case with Costco, that pretty much nothing was left between the attorneys and ourselves. So everything is public, and we're taking that to heart. And for every project, everything goes public. So if you would.
Yep, that's always good to keep in mind. I agree.
Okay.
Jean Wilson, you may proceed. Unmute.
We're not hearing you yet, Jean.
Try again, Jean. You're muted.
Okay.
Okay.
There you go.
The little box hadn't popped up to unmute. So I have an ADU comment. And for those who didn't know, we have had ADU ordinance on our books for a number of years. We called it second residential units. The state has made further requirements that we need to make, but we have had that possibility for quite a while, including a fee break for the second unit. You pay as for a multifamily unit for the second one and not the full single family unit fee. I happen to know before the counting period, in my area, in the RA and the RE, 3 different families that put in second units. And if you're on a larger lot, you can even have up to 1,200 square feet. Smaller lots, you have a smaller size allowance. And some of the rural places may be a little bit limited because they will have to prove that they have adequate well and septic to have more units, but a lot of them probably can. And I think even if we can't put it in our housing element for a larger number because of the formula, I think we are likely to be able to exceed that number, both from the more rural area and the rest of town. So my question is, what if we do get more ADUs than projected, and we can work at that like the county is? If we get more than projected, does it help our state requirement for housing in any way? Are they all considered, or how do they decide if it's moderate or low or how affordable it is? And, you know, do these help us if we get more than is projected, and what can that do to help us out on our numbers, if anything? Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Lori, you may proceed. You just need to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. I'm just going to cover just a few concerns that I have. I'm a resident of Placer County, but I used to be a resident of Stockton, California. And I just want to say that Stockton became what it became because the city council decided to start putting duplexes and apartments on every other corner of every neighborhood. And now there are no nice neighborhoods in Stockton, and it's full of crime and dilapidation. And I just really want you guys to think about how close you want this to your city center, because it may end up adversely affecting you in the future. These buildings look nice for a short period of time, but after a while, and it's not always a long while, they bring a lot of crime, and the crime spreads. And it's not a theory that I'm saying to you, it is experience on decades and decades of seeing this happen over and over. The second thing is you're going to increase your population by about 20%. That may swing the vote of Loomis, and I just want you to think about that. I was on your environmental justice meeting last week, which talked about Cal EPA saying that there really are no disadvantaged areas in Loomis. And I feel like this is going to be creating one. So it almost feels like a vicious cycle of government making you create a disadvantaged area and then rewarding you for it. And I just want you all to really think about long-term thinking. Is it worth it? I hear that you're listening to a lot of staff and consultants, and I just hope that you're also listening to the residents. And I'm glad people are on here commenting on how they feel, and I hope that you will listen. My other question is this about getting grants, more grants from the government? I heard Anders talking about getting grants, and then also who will decide who lives in these units? And those are all my comments, and thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
Pam Blake, you may proceed. You just need to unmute.
Hello, I missed the first 45 minutes of this meeting because of a previous engagement, but I asked a question last Tuesday about, I made a comment on, I'm looking at my notes. I made a comment on the land and housing, and I received a confirmation email. And again, I clicked on it. I don't see my comment. So you have this on your webpage. You have a resident that makes a comment. What do you do with my comment? Because The problem that I'm having is you have, I'll just read it to you, thousands of homes are approaching along Sierra College and 193 in Lincoln. Rockland has plans to eventually connect Sierra College to Whitney Ranch Parkway. Sierra College will become a major regional corridor, whether the town likes it or not. The town should plan for this by upzoning properties along Sierra College to accommodate the much needed affordable housing projects. The problem that I have is I have a friend on Bankhead. I know somebody on Delmar. These people have property. They didn't buy property in rural Loomis to have the planning commission, town council, whatever, to start looking at upzoning areas around these rural town property owners that moved here, you know, for a reason. So just because Lincoln is doing it and Rockland and things are to come, I saw that. I made a comment to it. I'm glad I don't live over there. I feel for my friends that live over there. You know, and they should not be having the development. And I think one of the meetings I attended talked about 3-story condos, but to have that ranch land developed to have 20 units per acre to meet the affordable housing project. So can somebody answer my question about me actually making a comment on your webpage? Where does my comment go? Do you listen to my comment? Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. That's all the public.
Let me
Yeah.
answer.
Go ahead.
Let me answer that. So every comment that we receive is going into a database that is going to the consultant team, going to the planning commission, going to the appropriate committees for their review and consideration. So every comment is being distributed, plus the comments as they come in are going to be posted to the town's website so that anyone in the public can review those comments. So we're in the process of doing that. So far, we're over 600 comments. So I will say we're a bit behind in responding to each comment, but each comment as it comes in is provided to the appropriate committee. So your discussion about Sierra College Boulevard going north towards Lincoln, that is a topic that is being considered by the land use subcommittee called Sierra College north of Taylor. And it is being discussed, you know, those considerations for land uses along that area are the subject of that committee. And the overall land use committee will be discussing that, and then it will come to the planning commission at some point in time. The housing element does not talk about rezoning any land in that area because that has not been discussed, that is not a position yet of the town. So that is still being considered.
Thanks, Andres.
I have Miguel Yukovich. Just unmute and you're ready to go, Miguel.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you. My first question is, I heard the number 352 units are necessary. How do we go from 100 units high density to 352? At 352, that's about 1,000 people. If you look at the SACOG projections for future population in Loomis, that's more than the population projection is for 2040. So I have a question about that number. It seems excessive, especially when we only have 6,000 people here now. Why would we have to add another 1,000? I totally agree with Stephanie's comments about what the public wants here. They want to maintain a rural atmosphere. You read several articles in the Sacramento Bee about Loomis and why people come to Loomis. It's basically because we're rural. You can buy a larger lot here and have that kind of lifestyle that you want. There are duplexes, I want to let you know, in the old part of Sunrise Loomis. On Margaret, there's a couple of the corners have and have had for many years duplexes. So they haven't been a negative impact on Loomis. The other thing about dividing 2.5 acres into smaller parcels for developing homes, need to remember the sewer requirements. And I think Loomis has a requirement right now for septic. You have to have at least 2.5 acres. So you can't divide everything. But additional dwelling units, I'm totally in support of that. There's many places where people could put another 1,200 square foot dwelling unit on their property. And I think we need to really look at that as a opportunity to add more housing units. The other thing that's kind of funny is that we're talking about building all these high density units and affordable housing, but there's no guarantee that any of these will be affordable. The developer for behind Rayleigh's basically has said it's not going to be affordable housing. It's going to be market rate. So are we solving the problem, or are we just presenting a bigger problem? Thank you.
Okay.
No additional hands raised, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you, everybody, for your comments. It's all been heard, taken to heart, and thank you. And so now we're going to go ahead and close public comment and bring this back to the Planning Commission. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Bonnie.
Sorry, Jean asked a question and I didn't hear the response to that.
Okay, well, typically and strictly speaking, reply to public comment is not a given. There's a lot of comment and a lot of questions, and we just take input. We're not allowed to deliberate on it, but it's not to say that we can't answer it, but generally speaking, because there's a lot of people that made statements that we've not responded to, and we really don't have time to do that. But if you have an answer for Jean's question, then go ahead.
No, I actually thought it was a really good question. I'd like to know the answer.
Okay.
If those ADUs do get built, can we count them for arena counts? Because I think that's important.
That is correct. Yeah, you can take credit every year on your annual progress report to the state. You get credit for every single unit that's built. Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead now and close public comment and bring it back to commission for a discussion and vote on the resolution. So does anybody have anything additional to say? I guess to summarize the entire discussion tonight, there is a lot of input, a lot of great suggestions and questions. I don't think we're in any position tonight to make any changes. All we can do is try to make some recommendations when we forward with this document to the council. So we can make, if somebody wanted to make a motion with us and attach some of the recommendations to the motion, I think that's probably a good way to go. So go ahead, Bonnie.
I'd like to make a recommendation that we do make the ADUs. So what is that, program 12, a higher priority, and really, you know, as Jennifer had pointed out, that if the existing high density overlay behind Rayleigh's turns out to be Marketplace, we're really going to need to be trying to figure out where we're going to capture those numbers. And, you know, if we were to bump that number up, at least that would be, you know, a few less that we would have to be trying to scramble around looking for.
Well, I think in the document and in the element, it might state 20 units, but there's we can recommend that they actually bump those numbers. But also, I think it's clear that there is opportunity, and any developer would know that we can raise those numbers through density bonuses. But so you want to go ahead and recommend, I want to get approval or consensus, I guess, with the rest of the commissioners. You want to recommend that we increase the numbers from 20 to what, 25
So,
dwelling
so
units per acre? Is that what you're saying?
no, for program 12, we currently have 3 ADUs per year is our goal for a total of 24 in the 8-year cycle.
Well, that's ADUs. I think you also went into another question, didn't you? Just about densities in general, or no, just ADUs you were talking about?
Right. What
Okay,
I was
all right.
putting in context was if the high density overlay where we're capturing our our very low and low numbers in RENA, if a project comes through and they're approved for and they're developed at market rate, then we need to scramble to try to find other very low and low units. And so right now, if you go to table 22, where it's the comparison of the RENA and available sites, we currently have 13 for the very low and low with a total of 24. And so I'd like to propose that we actually make the goal of 10 per year with a total of 80 in the 8-year cycle. And I believe that is what HCD came back to Rockland and recommended. And again, in context, we've actually permitted more ADUs in the past 2018, 2019 than Rockland did. So that's just my
But
recommendation.
by increasing that number to 10, now you're obligated to meet those
No.
ADUs.
We're never obligated. They're goals that you set because we
Well,
actually.
I see a lot of heads are nodding yes. There's like 5 heads nodding yes.
So
We are obligated.
it
and
is
that's- and that's the
it is very
problem.
much a balancing act. And if you are saying I mean, that's not going to get past HCD. So I'm just based on my experience, Rockland's numbers haven't been accepted. And so if you wanted to try to show 80, we could wait to go through the process. However, yes, you have to report on doing these. And if you're trying to say that you're doing them and you're not doing 10 a year, and you start by year 2, by year 3, if you haven't done 30, you will get a letter from HCD that says you did not do 30 that you said you would do to meet your RENA. You need to rezone land to high density to meet housing. So it does set you up in the next couple years for an issue. And that's why we put in a conservative number using the safe harbor from the state. So if you do 30 a year, you can count them. There's no
Right.
penalty. There's no problem with that.
So the other thing to think about is, so again, we don't have a project proposal or a project that's been approved over in that high density overlay where we're currently trying to capture. If again, a project's approved, it's at market rate, we're going to need to go around and scramble to figure out what we need to rezone anyways, right? And so if we set this goal and we really make it a priority for our community to say, hey, this is a time where you actually get some control to be able to diversify our housing stock and increase, some affordable housing units. I believe the community will do that. I also know that we have 9 units that will be coming up just in that mixed use Taylor project itself. And those are not large lots. From all of the information that I'm getting from community members, they're very interested in the ADUs for a variety of reasons, but it puts money into their pockets. It helps their specific situations. I spoke to the county housing planner, and they haven't even officially launched their program, and she's received over 300 calls and has like 175 plans already downloaded. So I do think that it's something that makes more sense for our community than in others. That's just my
Okay, well, so you recommending to make program 12 a higher priority, which is ADUs. I think you can change the wording to make it a higher priority, but without changing those numbers. There might be other incentives you can put in there.
I agree with Greg on that, because I think that if we promote it and more people do it, we're not going to be penalized if we have more than the number we projected. But if we don't meet our projection, that's not
penalized.
good. Yeah.
Well, we're still going to have to scramble for other sites if
that's
high density overlay. And so essentially we're kind of doing the same thing.
But that's true of any site. If you don't, if you have a site that's zoned or designated for 20 units and somebody buys that and they make it market rate and they're not affordable, now you still have to go out. So
Right.
you're constant, and that's the issue with this whole, the whole housing element. And the way you set your zoning is you make your best effort that you provide the land. And that's the next step that is outside the scope of this document, is how do you actually incentivize the builders to actually build it? And that's the crux of the matter. It's
And I
not so much.
affordable
this-
housing is really, really difficult to achieve. It really is.
Yeah.
Again, I think the
Mhm.
ADUs are probably our most practical, realistic, and cheapest way of being able to achieve it. And I just think we need to be very mindful and careful about upzoning any areas, because you can't downzone once it's upzoned. And so I just
Mhm.
think we need to be careful. And so to me, this is a more prudent approach. If we don't meet those goals, just like if the current HD zone goes market rate instead of affordable, then we're still really in the same position. We're not, it's not a bigger penalty than if the HD zone goes market rate, if that makes sense.
Andreas would like to make a comment, please.
Yes.
Yes, so I think it bears repeating at this point that state law already allows every single family property in town to have an ADU and a junior accessory dwelling unit. Nothing we put in the general plan, nothing we do with our zoning is going to impact that. That's already a state mandated requirement that we have to allow that. So if there's a pent up demand of people who are interested in developing ADUs, they already have an avenue to do that. And it's through a pretty streamlined process under the state law. And when Gene Wilson mentioned it earlier that the town already has some language in the municipal code about ADUs, which refers to a second units, I went and looked it up. So anybody who's curious about what the town currently has can look at the municipal code at section 13.42.270. And that talks about the town's current regulations regarding ADUs. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Okay. All right. So other recommendations that we want to forward to the council would be, how do you want to word this, Mike? Check for inconsistencies between the zoning code and the housing element. Does that sound good? Kind of straightforward.
You're muted.
I'm muted?
No,
Nope.
Mike is
Oh, Mike, yes.
still muted. Mike, you're. you
Okay,
go.
there we go. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Greg, that's shorter and better than what I wrote up. Would you repeat it for me?
Okay, we just want to recommend to the council that they check for verify consistency between the zoning code and the housing element. And then if they want to know what that means, we could kind of fill in the explanation about, the heights and the setbacks and, how many units per acre, and you're making it incompatible. And so basically just say, check that these two documents are consistent with each other.
I think that's great. Yeah,
All right.
we can, Carol, did you get that wording from Greg?
More or less, but I'm going to listen to it and write it down exactly.
Okay. Check for consistency between the zoning code and the housing elements. And you say, i.e., setbacks, heights, etc. And that'll kind of keep it short and sweet. And then I think, Bonnie, we'd almost have to have a consensus on whether or not to change that. Maybe we'll have a little side vote on whether we want to raise the ADUs from 3 to whatever number, or but let's say, I don't know if we need to make a motion, or can we ask for a consensus and just have a vote and say, do we want to actually increase the ADUs above 3? Make it as simple as that, yes or no. So does that sound like a good way to go? I think, do you agree with that statement? And that way we'll have a consensus with the commission whether or not we want to do that. Because if we put it in there and we vote to approve and the element, then that goes forward, and not everybody, I do not agree with that. So I think if we put it to a consensus vote, then I would go along with the consensus.
Andreas,
fair
are
enough.
you good with that approach?
So first, basically polling the commission about whether or not to increase the ADU number and then making the motion. Is that how I understand it?
Right, well, we will add that to the motion or not, depending on the consensus vote.
Yes. So yes, basically vote on the whether or not you have a consensus on the ADU piece first.
Yes, this is a
Yes, you can
separate
go ahead and
item.
do that way. Yeah.
Okay,
So
all
you
right,
can-
so we'll do
You
that.
can poll your commission on that first. Yes.
So do you want me to do
Okay.
that, or is you something you
Let's
want?
go ahead. Yeah, I want you to do that, Carol, just with just call a vote, roll call, and we'll just say, yay or nay. Is that wording okay, Bonnie? Okay, so
Okay, let's,
we'll have a
go.
consensus vote as to whether to increase the ADU requirement above 3. Yes or no?
let's go
Go ahead,
with
Carol.
Commissioner Kelly,
No.
Commissioner London,
Yes.
Commissioner Youngblood,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
I think no, because I don't want to hold us to a requirement, but I hope we achieve the goal of more ADUs.
and Chairman Obranovich.
No. Okay.
Okay,
So we will not be forwarding that recommendation. However, we can leave the language that we can try to improve the number 12 to encourage ADUs as a higher priority without changing the numbers. Okay. All right. Is there anything else we wanted to forward to the council's recommendation to this, the element?
Yes, I have the inclusionary zoning ordinance where the time frame is to have it incorporated by December 2023 and then recommended adoption to town council by March 2024. I'd actually like to move that up to, that we recommend moving it up to December 2021 and adopted by town council by March 2022.
This has to, I don't understand what you're asking. What
To
are we
move
changing?
Time frame up.
Move it up. You mean push it back later?
No, right now, it's currently recommended to be incorporated December 2023 and then recommended adoption to town council by March 2024. I'm suggesting we actually move it up so that they look at it December 2021 to adopt by March 2022.
Oh. We have to get some feedback on that from Andres and staff. Is that something that we can do? Is that feasible, reasonable?
I think I'll just comment that I think we put it in that this would occur after your general plan is done. So you'll finish your general plan and then you'll pivot and hire a consultant and do the analysis, the fee analysis and all that to do the, and go through the process. I've seen that process take a little bit of time to actually develop the inclusionary ordinance. So I think it was, again, general plan, then implementation of that. So there's no fault in doing it sooner or no issue with doing it sooner. Other than the fact that I think it's been pointed out there that there's a lot of programs and this is relying on the staff of Mary Beth to get a lot of this done. So it's a lot for one person to take on. I guess so it's up to staff, but there isn't a state issue here on that.
Okay,
And
maybe we can.
is there an issue if we put a sooner date on it and we don't accomplish it? Does that go farther?
No, you just,
Okay.
you're reporting, no, we haven't done it yet. No, we haven't done it yet. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, maybe we could just word it as we would incur, rather than require, we could say we're encouraging to change the timeline up. That might be a little more reasonable. And then that'll kind of set a goal without having the burden of it being a requirement. Okay. So do you want to, can you go ahead and restate that, Bonnie, so we can capture that in the motion?
We'll essentially with program 9, recommend incorporating inclusionary ordinance sooner than later or before the existing or the stated time frame. Because it seemed to be with the housing committee, the one issue that was a high priority.
Okay. So I put recommend number 9, moving up the timeline to an earlier date.
That sounds great.
Okay, all right. Let's say what, okay. Let's put in a date. For example, what date would you propose that's reasonable?
I proposed December 2021 and then adopted to town council by March 2022.
Okay. Okay. All right, so any others? Things that we need to throw in there maybe to try to, the council might want to take a look at? So basically what we're going to do is we're going, hopefully, will be to approve this resolution to forward the draft housing element along with these recommendations. So it's not like we're telling them they have to incorporate that in there, but these are recommendations for them to consider. Okay, and I think that's about all we can do at this point.
Just
Andres.
Yeah, real quick question of Jenny. I have not done an inclusionary ordinance, whatever. How long does it typically take a developer to do that? Because my gut reaction, if it goes to the council in December, we're already behind schedule, hiring a consultant, getting the studies done, doing the environmental documentation, and getting it to the council. So
Yeah, my guess is you would want to get I mean, this might be something you want to table just because Mary Beth you might want to consult with some financial consultants who do this, because yes, first step would be to get an RFP put together, get it on the street, get proposals so that you guys can proceed on that. And then typically I've seen inclusionary ordinance take 1 year to 2 years, depending on how much information and how, if you want in lieu fee, if you want on-site, if you want outside, there's so many nuances to inclusionary housing ordinances. So yeah, at least 1 year, I would say. But again, I can give you some names of some consultants that you can speak to who specialize in that to get a better understanding of how long it would take to get done.
Yeah, if you could give that to Mary Beth, that would be really helpful. But I just started to think about it because just getting an RFP out, you have to circulate it 30 days. You need 30 days to review it. There's a 2 month to 2.5 month period just to find a consultant, and then you negotiate the contract.
You have to have several readings to the council. It goes to the planning commission, then it's got to go to like 2 readings to the council. So it takes a while. We could just recommend that they attempt to move that forward to an earlier date and maybe not specify the date, and then they can make that determination. They can maybe take a look and see what might be reasonable.
And in this resolution, Jenny, but my thought is really, Bonnie, what you're wanting to say is we want the council to begin taking direction on an inclusionary zoning ordinance now, is really what you're saying. And trying to tie it down, I think it all depends on getting the consultant and getting the studies done. So I'm not sure, Jenny, if you have language that, it's giving the town council a heads up, you need to authorize this to move forward within the next 30, 60 days prior to the housing element being adopted.
Yeah, I mean, so it's out of date by the time that if we put a program that says the next 30, 60 days, I think it sounds like something the commission should make sure. I mean, we do have it as a housing committee priority, as something that has definitely been encouraged by the commission and a top priority, I guess. So I think it would be on commission to emphasize to the council how much of a priority this is, for sure.
Yeah, and Andres,
why don't we just word it like,
do we do this in this resolution or a separate resolution? So Andreas, you're kind of calling that one, and also Jenny, does that what if it was a separate resolution that goes to the council saying, this is a high priority of the housing committee, this is a high priority of the planning commission to authorize proceeding with the inclusionary ordinance immediately.
So whether or not you make it a separate resolution or a separate vote item would really depend on whether or not you're going forward with trying to change the housing element date for the inclusionary ordinance, or whether the recommendation to the council is to act quickly on adopting a program without modifying the date in the housing element.
Okay, so it seems more reasonable just to again emphasize that we would like the sooner than later instead of specifying the time date or the timeline.
All right.
Right.
Okay, I think that's reasonable.
Okay. All right, so we'll just leave that bundled in with the other items, I think. All right. So is there anything else? I think we've covered it pretty well. If I missed anything. All right. So the resolution is before us, and it's a resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Loomis recommending submittal of the draft 2029 housing element to HCD to the town council with the following. I'm not making the motion. I'll leave it for somebody else. I'm trying to kind of rephrase it unless somebody has it already written out and ready to go. And then we had 1, 2, 3, like 4 items to attach as recommendations for consideration. Okay, somebody want to run with it?
Can I just say, I so move?
We can do it that way.
Adopt
Usually the planning commissioner or the chairman doesn't make the motion, but
I know.
it's not, they can. I have done that when everybody gets a little tongue-tied.
There's a lot in there, but basically adopt resolution number 21-01 to forward the draft 2021-29 housing element to the town council for their approval, to submit to the California Housing and Community Development Department for their 60-day review, and the 4 items to consider with that.
Okay, and that being make program number 12 a higher priority, check for consistency between the zoning code and the housing element, and recommend moving the program number 9 up to and reemphasize the inclusionary ordinance.
Correct.
Okay.
I so move.
All right. So we've got a motion.
I second.
Well, we need a second.
Bonnie just seconded.
Okay. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Commissioner Kelly.
Aye.
Commissioner London.
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan.
Yes.
Commissioner Youngblood.
You're muted, Stephanie.
Can I abstain? Or no? No.
You're abstaining. Yeah,
You can abstain or you can vote no. Both are
No.
Okay. All right. And okay, great.
Chairman Obranovich.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. So the motion, the resolution is being forwarded to the council. Great work, hard work, tough work. Good job. And I think we've done the right thing. And there's still a lot of work ahead. That's for sure. Council's got a lot of work, and all the committees have their jobs to do, and we'll start putting that together. Okay, so that's behind us. I think next we have a planning director's report.
Yes, good evening once again. I kind of updated this a little since last week just to keep you up to date as possible. But I provide you the following update on planning department matters. As you know, committees have been seated in regular monthly committee and subcommittee meetings began mid-March. At this time, the majority of committees have conducted their second meetings. We have a total of 16 committees with 9 members each and 3 to 6 meetings each week, all conducted via Zoom. We continually monitor our website and update continuously. All meetings, just like Planning Commission, but all the committee meetings are recorded live through the Town of Lubbock YouTube channel and available for easy retrieval. On April 22nd, with the Taylor Road Downtown Business Corridor, we were able to conduct a Loomis Streetscape Design Workshop. And that was held in conjunction with the Local Government Commission and the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. In addition to the 9 committee members at this meeting, there were 7 public members who took part in the workshop. It was a very engaging workshop. The report out details will be distributed as soon as received. At the end of that workshop, Paul Zykoski with LGC offered one additional session to the town of Loomis. We took him up on his offer, and another workshop of the same nature, but with the emphasis on the whole town circulation system, will be conducted with invites sent to Town Council, Planning Commission, and all General Plan Update Committee members. And this meeting is scheduled to be held next week on May 12th at 6 p.m. And we really encourage the public to attend. It's a very interactive, rather engaging thing. Maybe a half hour for the mapping exercise and a total of an hour to conclude comments and feedback. We did last month launch our social pinpoint program, and we can thank Sarah Day Jennings for creating this wonderful tool. We launched it. Many people have been going there and making comments, putting comments on walls, and doing all of that thing. So on our main homepage, right up at the top green banner, there's a button that says social pinpoint, and just click on that and take the journey, and feel free to leave comments on. There's many items related to our general plan update, and then just an ideas wall. Hey, I think we need a tree over here kind of thing. So have fun with that. As you recall, the Planning Commission approved in February the Ace Hardware Annex building at the end of Walnut Court by Blue Anchor Park. And that matter has not returned back from Greg Brenning from Ace Hardware for architectural review. But I am happy to say they are looking at renting Main Drug or leasing to sell outdoor furniture and outdoor goods from inside that store as an additional sales location for them. Loomis RV Campground is the application for a small 37-space RV campground, no mobile homes, at 5847 Brace Road. Month-to-month occupancy. The application has been under review. We're now waiting for additional information from the applicant in order to push that application forward to the Planning Commission. Still under review is Kinesel Auto Body at the existing Homewood Lumber site, and that's a modification to their existing use permit. And then the Hidden Grove pre-application submittal. Again, we're waiting for additional information from that applicant in order to determine a complete application. A couple of miscellaneous odds and ends. Placer County Transportation Planning Agency has been holding several online community workshops throughout the county to discuss how they can build a better transportation network in Placer County. Loomis's workshop is coming up this Thursday, May 6th from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. This workshop will serve as a platform for community members to provide feedback and learn more about the transportation projects being planned in Placer County, as well as the overall funding strategy for those projects. To get more information on that, you can go to pctpa.net. To register for the website, it would be www.keepplacermoving, all one word, .com. If you go to that website, they have a registration link right on the front. So Town Hall, as of today, Town Hall is now open for public counter hours Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The Loomis Library is now regularly open to the public, and you can check their website for updates. And our next Planning Commission regular meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, May 25th at 7 p.m.
All right. Thank you, Mary Beth.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the planning director's report?
Will the meeting be Zoom the end of in May 25th, or will it be at the train depot?
I anticipate we'll be at the train depot since we worked out our echo bug. So
Yeah, I think it's great. We're going to more in-person meetings, at least as far as the staff and council and planning commission. And also, I think they might they're going to consider holding the meetings at the Blue Goose Event Center. Yeah. So that'll give us a larger capacity and still being able to maintain social distancing. If you do that here at the depot, you're not going to get too many people in there with social distancing.
Exactly.
Okay, any other comments on the planning director's report?
I just want to thank Mary Beth for all of the work you're doing. I mean, I'm on 8 committees. You're on 17. I can't even imagine. So thank you for, just all the hard work you're doing. It's really appreciated.
Yes,
Thank you,
I concur. Thank you, Mary Beth. You're the hero. Yeah, that's a lot. Hang in there. We've got a little ways to go. Don't, just keep pulling up. Okay, do we have, next I'll go to any reports from the planning commissioners. For this would be reports you want to give that things that are not on the agenda. Okay, doesn't look like.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
We just, there's another full week of the subcommittees that are meeting this week. And I now off the top of my head, I'll have to try to figure it out, but I think economic development is tomorrow. And then we have, oh boy, now I'm
circulation, historic,
land
cultural, land use, and then air, GHG, and climate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I've just been sometimes, again, the ones that I'm on, I have to be there clearly, but some of the others, I'll just put it on because as Anders mentioned, if you follow the town's YouTube station, then you will automatically get updates when there's a new meeting that's been uploaded, and I'll just listen to those while I'm doing my chores or I'm driving, and it's fascinating. I mean, all of them have just been so interesting, but the historical and cultural one, unbelievable. So encourage everybody to try to listen to those.
Yeah. Okay. So I had something I was going to, on my end, on a note, I'm on 2 committees that are on Thursday, and I work on Thursday, so it's kind of, I ended up unintentionally on those Thursday committees, and so my work schedule might change down the road a little bit, but I'll be following just by watching. If I can't be at the meeting, I'll pick it up by watching Zoom after the fact. Mary Beth recommended I stay with the committees rather than drop off and hang on that way, and then hopefully I can pick up a little bit later. Okay.
I had one more announcement that I forgot to print because it happened between last week and this week. But also coming up on Wednesday, May 12th at 6 p.m., we are going to play the density game. And it's another workshop put on by LGC in cooperation with SACOG. It's going to be good. So it's all about housing and guessing how big things are and where. So we've got not only the circulation interactive mapping tool, but the density game for different houses, and it'll show you different choices, and you get to guess if it's 10 to 20 units an acre or 50 to 60. So we'll do polling questions along the way and kind of see who's getting things right, just in general. Different housing types, different makeups. So we encourage everybody to attend.
You'd be sending us a link to that? Is that how that
Yes,
works?
sir. Yes.
All right, great. Look forward to that. Sounds like one of those little online video games or something.
Yeah, kind of. It'll
Like
be short.
Farmville or something. Okay. All right, everybody. And then I think we'll go ahead and adjourn tonight's meeting and pick it up next time.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.